Hello and welcome to Good or Bad. It's Christmas again! And what would Christmas be without John McLean shooting up some bad guys? It's Die Hard 2! Die Harder. Did people die too softly in the last one? So I have two questions to answer here. Is Die Hard 2 as good of a movie as the first one? And is it as good of a Christmas film? Let's find out together. Returning cast members are Bruce Willis as our constantly in the wrong place at the wrong time hero, John McClane, Bonnie Bedelia as his wife, Holly McLean, who must be getting really fed up of being trapped in really high up places by now, as well as William Atherton as the sleazeball news hotshot. And in a more cameo role, Reginald VeL-Johns returns as Sergeant Al Powell, the only man who loves Twinkies more than Tallahassee. Everyone else is new. So what's this one about then? Well, it's Christmas Eve and John is in Washington, ready to meet his wife at the airport. Which just so happens to be the exact same airport that big bad drug lord General Esperanza, played by Franco Nero, is being flown to, who has been arrested for being naughty and is being escorted to this airport under high security. And by high security I mean one guard that can't keep his eye on him and therefore gets strangled. He paid the price for incompetence. But that isn't actually how Esperanza escapes. No, that is down to William Sadler's Colonel Stewart and his team of bad guy soldiers, who remotely take over the airport and metaphorically hold their balls in a vice. Also, what a way to introduce a villain, having him practice fight moves in the nude while watching the news. Maybe they just couldn't get Alan Rickman to do that. But enough of nudity, they cut off all communication between the aircrafts and the tower and turn off all the runway lights. And basically say, do as we say, or we're gonna crash planes. And what they want them to do is hand over Esperanza to them and give them a getaway plane. And because Holly is stuck up in one of those planes with not enough fuel to make it to another airport, John feels obligated to help. This leads to a lot of shootouts, a man called Marvin, and the bad guy from Terminator 2 calling someone a sitting duck.
Hey asshole, what do I look like to you?
A sitting duck.
Which naturally makes this an outright fantastic movie. Also, there's a man called Carmine that shouts at McLean a lot.
Hey Carmine, let me ask you something. What sets off the metal detectors first? The lead in your ass or the shit in your brains?
Now if that's not an insult, I don't know what is. But the twisty bit happens when the good guys call for reinforcements. A counter-terrorist team arrives led by General Grant, played by... John Amos. And just as things are looking up, it turns out that they are in on it! And they want to live out the rest of their lives in luxury for saving General Esperanza? Well, isn't that a slap to the balls? And McLean discovers this during a firefight between Grant's squad and Stewart's bad guys. McLean steals one of the bad guys' machine guns, which suspiciously has a bit of blue tape around the magazine. He then has an enemy in his sights. He fires, but nothing happens. You know, if it wasn't for the sheer amount of plot armour that's around John McClane, he'd be very dead by now. So realising that all of Colonel Stewart's guys were just firing blanks, he puts two and two together and goes marching back to Mr. Shouty at McLean guy and tells him this in the most dangerous way possible. You know, I suspect if that ever happened in real life, any one of those guards would have opened fire on him before they realised that they were blanks. But then there's the plot armour to consider, so I guess they wouldn't open fire. Oh, and speaking of plot armour, it is never more evident than in this scene. So McLean has managed to intercept Esperanza's plane because of a bad guy walkie-talkie that he got from Marvin. Isn't Marvin the best? You know what? I want Christmas to change to Marvinmas. Merry Marvinmas, everyone! Yeah, I think that's really going to catch on. But yeah, anyway, McLean managed to intercept his plane and he ends up holding up on the inside as all of Colonel Stewart's men shoot it up from the outside. Now that alone would definitely be enough to kill most people. But because this is John McLean, they throw a load of grenades into the cockpit. Now I'm no expert on explosives. However, I do believe that the standard fuse timer for most grenades is about 4 seconds. These ones, on the other hand, these have the longest fuse timers I have ever seen.
You lucky fuck.
Lucky? Lucky, you say? Luck doesn't come into it, my friend. Oh, no. This is none other than the power of poor writing. Now, every Die Hard film has its Yippee Kai moment, and this one comes just as all the bad guys are about to escape. McLean has a bit of a fight on the wing of the escaping plane. I'm just going to accept that they wouldn't fall off of that wing immediately. Major Grant then meets a bitter end. I am just going to accept that that wouldn't immediately break the engine. Stewart then throws McLean off of the plane, but not before he rips open the fuel intake cover. And I guess I will also accept that that fall wouldn't immediately kill him. So because he isn't dead, unconscious, or even slightly dazed, he grabs his lighter and lights the fuel trail.
Yippee Kai, motherfucker.
Now all the planes have a landing light! And one by one they all land safely, and they all live. Oh, and I'd just like to talk about Mr. Sleazeball News Hotshot that were in the first film. He happens to be on the exact same plane as Holly, and spends the movie trying to figure out what is going on. And at one point uses the onboard phone to call his news team to give them a story. Because he was able to listen in and record some radio chatter after the good guys restored a form of communication with the planes. He gets tasered by Holly, which is funny and everything, but the point is, there was a phone on that plane that worked this entire time and nobody thought to use it. Really? And the movie never mentions an explanation as to why they didn't try it, or it doesn't work because of reasons. I mean, yeah, sure, 2 people used the phone, Sleazeball and Holly, to call John. And both of them were after the good guys figured out that they could reconfigure a thing called the outer marker to warn their planes in the sky about terrorists that were impersonating the tower. The phones on the planes didn't come into it. All they did was reconfigure a beacon that beeps letting planes know that they are over the tower to allow the tower to speak to the planes over a one-way broadcast. So unless I'm missing something, the phones were an option that not one person on any of those planes thought to use. I mean, at most, maybe you could say that the blizzard interfered with the phones, but at no point does the film mention this. And even if it was the case, the terrorists took over the tower's normal method of radioing the planes, but why didn't they just get another airport to radio the planes? Or even find another radio themselves? But I guess we just have to deploy a lot of suspension of disbelief to accept the fact that the terrorists took over every form of communication. Either that or they're just idiots. Now, at the start of the video I asked 2 questions, one of them being, is it as good as the first film? The answer, quite simply, no. No, it isn't. It is a very enjoyable film, but it just isn't as good as the first Die Hard. It just lacks the depth that the first film had. None of the bad guys have the same charisma and menacing presence as Alan Rickman's Hans Gruber. That first film had a greater sense of isolation for John, as he was trapped with little resources in Nakatomi Towers. Whereas this time, he has the freedom to go around an entire airport almost, and if he was so inclined to, he could just leave. But yeah, no, he never even thought of leaving, because he was never going to leave Holly to face a death by aircraft crash. It certainly keeps him on his toes, but in the first film, we see him surrounded by people who are constantly trying to kill him. He had to scavenge every bit of equipment, hell, even shoes, and come up with a plan to survive and save Holly. And while he does have the same goals, he isn't as isolated, and he has resources and a place he can go where he's not being shot at. So I think the first film wins out because of its sense of claustrophobia. That, and it didn't have a potential communications plot hole, but let's move on from that. And as for my second question, is it as good of a Christmas movie? Well, no, but that's mostly because you don't have an Alan Rickman saying ho ho ho.
Now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah, okay, I don't do it as good as he does. But that being said, it is still a fun Christmas action film. There is Christmas music, and a Robert Costanzo saying Merry Christmas.
McLean, say hi to my brother, Vito. Merry Christmas.
But there is a reason why you don't get people arguing that Die Hard 2 is their favourite Christmas movie, which is simply because it isn't as Christmassy as the first one. I mean, it is set at Christmas, there are Christmas songs, and Christmassy imagery. So it counts, but it isn't quite as festive as the first one. So that's my thoughts on Die Hard 2, Die Harder. A stupid tagline, but a fun way to spend a couple of hours on a cold winter night. So Yippee Kai, enjoy your stuffing, and see you next time. Bye. Stuart then throws McLean off of the plane, but not before McLean rips the fuel lid.